Welcome to Bedtime Express, your gateway to peaceful, restorative sleep. I'm your guide, and tonight we're embarking on a journey to 17th century Japan, stepping into the serene world of a samurai household during the Edo period. Before you fall asleep, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more beautiful, immersive stories designed to help you sleep deeply and wake refreshed. In the next hours, you'll discover the structured daily life, the ancient traditions, and the profound beauty of a samurai estate. From the quiet awakening at dawn to the peaceful descent into evening, you'll experience the rituals, the training, and the deep wisdom of a culture that found meaning in discipline, duty, and the pursuit of excellence. This is a story designed to slow your mind, to ease your body, and to guide you gently towards sleep. So get comfortable, dim your lights, and prepare yourself for rest. Let the pace of this story match the rhythm of your breathing, and allow the tranquil world of the Takeda household to envelop you in calm. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let us begin our journey into the peaceful night. Sweet dreams await. Life in a Japanese samurai household during the Edo period. As the first light of morning begins to paint the sky in soft shades of gray and pale blue, we find ourselves at the threshold of a grand samurai estate nestled in the verdant countryside of Japan's Edo period. The year is somewhere in the middle of that peaceful era, perhaps 1720, perhaps 1760, a time when the great samurai clans have long since put away their swords from constant warfare, and the nation has settled into a rhythm as steady and measured as the beating of a drum in a temple far away. This is the Takeda household, a proud clan of considerable standing, and within its walls and gardens, we are about to witness the gentle unfolding of a day that repeats, with only minor variations, across the seasons and years. The estate itself is a masterpiece of Japanese architectural sensibility. The main residence, or honma, sits at the heart of the compound like a sleeping dragon, its tiled roof with curved eaves casting intricate shadows in the early morning light. Around it, connected by covered walkways and open galleries, are the quarters for the family, the guest rooms of impressive proportions, the servants' areas, and the various functional buildings that make up the complete household. There is a beautiful koi pond with a small wooden bridge that arcs gracefully over its still surface, reflecting the sky like polished glass. Beyond that lie the training grounds, the stables, the storage warehouses, and finally, the outer wall that separates this ordered world from the roads beyond. Inside the main residence, in the sleeping quarters, the household is just beginning to stir. The samurai lord, or daimyo, of the Takeda clan, a man named Takeda Noboru, who is now in his middle years with silver threading through his dark hair, lies on a thick futon, the Japanese bedding that rests upon the wooden floor. His wife, the Lady Takeda, lies beside him, her breathing deep and even, her face peaceful in the way that only sleep can make it. Around them the sliding doors, or shoji, are still closed, keeping the interior dim and cool. The tatami mat floors, those woven grass mats that give off such a distinctive and calming scent, absorb the quiet footsteps of servants as they begin their morning work. A young woman named Hana, who serves as a personal attendant to the lady of the house, moves silently through the corridors, carrying a small wooden bucket filled with fresh water drawn from the well just moments ago. Her footsteps make barely a whisper on the tatami. She has been with the household for 7 years, ever since she was just a girl of 12, and she knows the layout of these rooms as intimately as she knows the lines on her own palms. The cool morning air, fragrant with the scent of cypress wood from the walls, fills her lungs as she moves. She can hear, in the distance, the sound of someone sweeping the outer courtyard, the soft brush of the broom against stone, a sound that seems to belong to the very fabric of dawn itself. In another part of the estate, in the quarters designated for the samurai retainers, the skilled warriors who serve the daimyo, a man named Katsu, is already awake. He is 30 years old, with the lean, muscular frame of someone who has spent his entire life in disciplined physical practice. His eyes open to the semi-darkness of his room, and for a moment he simply lies there, breathing slowly, gathering his thoughts for the day ahead. This is a practice he has performed every morning for 20 years, ever since his training as a warrior began in earnest. To wake without rush, to simply be present with one's breath for a few moments, this is considered an essential part of the samurai way. His mind is already calm and collected, a mind like still water, ready to reflect whatever the day may bring. Katsu rises from his futon with practiced economy of motion, each movement flowing into the next like water finding its course downhill. He wears only a light cotton loincloth, and his skin is cool to the touch of the morning air. He begins his morning ablutions, pouring cold water from a ceramic pitcher into a wooden basin, washing his face and hands with deliberate slowness. The cold water shocks his skin, sending tiny shivers through his body, but he accepts this without flinching. Such small discomforts are considered opportunities to strengthen the spirit, to develop what the samurai call harage, the way of the belly or inner strength. After his washing, he performs a series of stretching exercises, moving his body through carefully prescribed positions, warming his muscles in preparation for the more rigorous training that will come later. The servants of the household are the true early risers, the ones who set the rhythm for everything else that will follow. In the large communal kitchen building, separate from the main residence for fire safety, several servants have been awake for more than an hour already. The head cook, a woman named Toku who is now in her 60s, and has been with the Takeda household for nearly 40 years, moves with the quiet authority of someone who has earned their position through decades of dedication. She directs the other kitchen servants with barely a gesture or a whispered word, and they respond to her silent commands with the synchronization of a traditional dance. Water is heating over the kitchen fires, rice is being prepared for cooking, vegetables are being cleaned and cut with sharp knives in smooth, practiced strokes. The kitchen is a place of warmth and comforting fragrance even at this early hour. Toku is heating water for the morning tea, and the subtle aroma of the water beginning to steam carries with it the promise of comfort and continuity. She knows that breakfast must be ready at a specific time, that the household operates on schedules as precise as the movement of celestial bodies. The daimyo will wake at dawn, will perform his own morning rituals, and at a specific time measured by the passage of the sun, he will be ready to break his fast. Everything in the household is organized around such points of structure and ceremony, these small rituals that, taken together, create the ordered world of the samurai estate. Outside, the sun is now beginning to clear the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pale rose. The gardens of the estate begin to reveal themselves as the light grows stronger. There are carefully pruned trees, shaped over many years into forms that suggest mountains and clouds. There are stone lanterns, their surfaces covered in soft moss, waiting patiently in the garden as they have waited for decades. There is a tea house positioned at the edge of the koi pond, a small structure of perfect simplicity, its wooden floor raised just slightly above the ground, offering a place from which to contemplate the water and the sky beyond. A gardener, an old man named Jiro, who has worked in these gardens for so long that some of the household members can barely remember a time when he was not here, begins to move among the plants, pruning here, adjusting a branch there, reading the plants as if they were pages in a book written in a language only he fully understands. The estate is beginning to wake, very gradually, like someone slowly opening their eyes after a long and peaceful sleep. There is no sudden noise, no harsh sounds or shouts. Everything is done with a kind of quiet grace, as if the household is performing a dance that has been choreographed over generations. The birds in the garden sing their morning songs, indifferent to the human world, their voices clear and pure in the fresh morning air. And somewhere in the bell tower of a nearby Buddhist temple, a single stroke of the morning bell echoes across the valley, calling the faithful to wake and acknowledge the beginning of a new day. As the morning light settles fully over the estate, the daily rhythm begins in earnest, and we come to understand one of the fundamental truths about life in a samurai household during the Edo period. Every moment is accounted for, every action has its purpose, and the day itself is structured with the precision of a complex mathematical equation. This is not oppressive structure, though an outsider might think so at first. Rather, it is liberating, for within this framework of ritual and routine, the mind can relax, knowing that all is being cared for according to established principles. The daimyo Takeda Noboru emerges from his sleeping quarters just as the sun has fully cleared the horizon. He wears a simple cotton garment as he moves through the morning light, his hair still slightly disheveled from sleep. He proceeds directly to the bathing area of the estate, a room built specifically for this purpose, where hot water has been carefully prepared by servants who timed the heating of the large wooden tub to coincide with the moment of his awakening. The water is almost uncomfortably hot, but the daimyo enters it without hesitation, lowering his body into the steaming depths with a soft exhalation of breath. The heat penetrates his muscles, loosening them from the stiffness of sleep, and he closes his eyes, allowing himself a few moments of complete relaxation. Bathing in Japan, particularly among the samurai class, is far more than a simple matter of cleanliness. It is a ritual, a time for contemplation, a bridge between sleep and the activities of the day. The daimyo remains in the hot water for some time, thinking about the day ahead, considering any matters that require his attention, but mostly just being present with the sensation of warmth and the gentle movement of the water against his skin. When he finally emerges, servants wait with large soft cloths to wrap around him, and he moves to a dressing room where his formal clothes for the day have been laid out with perfect precision. The clothing of a samurai of rank during the Edo period is an elaborate affair, and dressing is not a quick process. The daimyo begins with undergarments of fine cotton, then adds a kosode, an under-kimono of silk dyed in subtle shades of brown and gray. Over this goes a haori, a short jacket, also of silk, decorated with the family crest, the mon, which identifies him immediately as a member of the Takeda clan. Then comes the hakama, the formal divided skirt-like garment worn by samurai of high rank, pleated and starched to maintain its sharp creases, colored a deep indigo that seems to hold the light within its folds. Finally, he ties his obi, the wide sash that wraps around the waist, securing all the garments in place. Everything is done with a kind of ritualistic care, and by the time he is fully dressed, he has been transformed from a sleeping man into the formal representation of his position and authority. His wife, the Lady Takeda, follows a similar though somewhat less elaborate routine in the adjacent women's quarters. Her name is Takeda Yuki, and she is now 43 years old, having been married to the daimyo for 18 years. She has borne him 3 children, 2 sons who are now grown and working as samurai in their own right, and 1 daughter who is just 15 and preparing for her own marriage to a young warrior from a neighboring clan. Her morning bathing is followed by her dressing, which involves even more layers and considerations of propriety than her husband's. She wears a kosode of the finest silk, dyed in a pattern called shibori, where the fabric has been tied and dipped repeatedly in indigo until a pattern of lighter and darker blue emerges, like clouds seen from above. Over this, she wears an elaborate uchikake, a long decorative robe that hangs from her shoulders, embroidered with images of cherry blossoms and cranes. Her hair, which has been let down and brushed by her attendants, is now arranged in an elaborate style, with ornamental pins of bone and shell holding it in place. By the time both the daimyo and his wife have completed their morning preparations, nearly an hour and a half has passed, though neither of them feels rushed or pressured by this passage of time. It is simply how things are done, the proper way to begin the day, and to deviate from this established routine would be to introduce a kind of chaos into the ordered world of the household. They meet in the formal reception room, a space of considerable elegance with an alcove, or tokonoma, where a single scroll painting hangs this morning. It depicts Mount Fuji in winter, snow-covered and serene, and beneath it sits a simple arrangement of evergreen branches in a ceramic vase, a reminder of endurance and life even in the coldest season. Breakfast is served in this room, though it is not a lavish meal. The samurai, particularly those of high rank, often practice a kind of restrained approach to eating, seeing excessive indulgence as contrary to the values of discipline and moderation. The morning meal consists of rice, still warm and fragrant, a bowl of miso soup with tofu and seaweed, some pickled vegetables, a small grilled fish, and tea. Everything is served in ceramic bowls and dishes of great beauty, each piece part of a set that has been in the family for generations, but the food itself is simple and nourishing. The daimyo eats slowly, deliberately, chewing each bite thoroughly, a practice believed to aid both digestion and mindfulness. His wife sits slightly lower than he does, eating from her own tray, which is identical in content but served with slightly smaller portions, an acknowledgement of her role as his supporting partner. After breakfast, the day begins to branch into different paths according to the roles and responsibilities of various household members. The daimyo himself is not occupied with the daily management of the estate, for he employs a steward, a man named Yamamoto Ichiro, who handles such matters with quiet competence. Instead, the daimyo's responsibilities are more elevated, more philosophical in nature. He must sometimes meet with other samurai of rank, listen to reports about the surrounding region, consider matters of policy and precedent, and ensure that the reputation and honor of the Takeda clan remain unblemished. On this particular day, however, he has no such formal meetings scheduled, and so he will occupy himself with pursuits that are considered befitting a man of culture and refinement. Shortly after breakfast, the daimyo makes his way to the library study, a room filled with scrolls and books, some of them very old, written in classical Chinese as well as in Japanese. Here he spends the late morning hours in the company of books, and his own thoughts. Today he is studying a text about military strategy written by a great general from a previous century, but interspersed with his reading, he is also composing a short poem, a haiku, which is the form of poetry most beloved by samurai, who see in its brevity and simplicity a reflection of their own values. The act of composing poetry is not considered frivolous by the samurai. Rather, it is part of the development of one's cultivation, one's ability to perceive beauty and meaning in the world. By training the mind to see the profound in the small and ordinary, a samurai also trains himself to understand the deep principles that underlie all things, including the art of strategy and governance. Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, the samurai retainers are beginning their training. Katsu, the warrior we encountered this morning, is now in the training courtyard with several other men, all of them wearing loose cotton training clothes, barefoot on the stone floor. They are practicing kenjutsu, the art of sword combat, and their movements are almost hypnotic in their precision and grace. The wooden swords bokken make sharp clicking sounds as they meet, but there is an underlying quality of control to every movement, a sense that violence is being held in suspension, transformed into something almost like dance through the sheer discipline of training. The master-at-arms who directs this training is a man named Fukuda Jiro, a samurai in his 70s who has spent more than 50 years in the service of the Takeda clan. He moves slowly between the training pairs, his eyes missing nothing, correcting a posture here, suggesting a slight adjustment to foot placement there. His voice, when he speaks, is low and calm, but carries such natural authority that every warrior hears him clearly and adjusts their technique accordingly. Training with swords is the heart of what it means to be a samurai, and yet in the Edo period, with peace established across the realm, this training has become somewhat more ritualized, more focused on form and discipline than on practical application in actual combat. Still, the training is rigorous and demanding, and after an hour of such practice, even the youngest of the warriors is beginning to feel the strain in his muscles and the fatigue beginning to cloud his mind. The training session ends with a ritual bow. The warriors stand in a line, their breathing still rapid from their exertion, and they bow together to their master, to the tradition they represent, and to each other. There is a moment of profound silence, a pause in which the energy that has been built up through the training is allowed to settle and integrate itself into their being. Then, with quiet words of dismissal from the master, they exit the courtyard, moving toward the bathing facilities to cool and cleanse themselves from the sweat of their practice. In the women's quarters, the Lady Takeda and her attendants occupy themselves with the work of maintaining the household at a level of beauty and order that is expected of her rank. She is in a room where the household accounts are kept, reviewing the records of food purchases, supplies, and the wages paid to the servants. This is work that might seem tedious to an outsider, but in the samurai household, it is understood to be a crucial responsibility. The wife of a daimyo is not a decorative figure, but rather a co-manager of the household, and she must be intimately involved in all matters relating to its smooth functioning. She works with a level-headed older woman named Matsu, who has served as the household manager for 20 years and who knows every detail of the estate's operations. They discuss the upcoming season, when certain foods will come into availability, and plan menus several weeks in advance, accounting for the nutritional needs of the household, as well as the need to maintain proper standards of hospitality should guests arrive unexpectedly. The morning moves toward noon with a kind of stately progression. The light from the windows shifts and changes as the sun moves across the sky. In the garden, the old gardener Jiro is still at his work, tending to the plants with an attention that borders on meditative, as if each plant is a student from whom he is constantly learning. The koi in the pond rise to the surface around midday, drawn by the warmth and the increased light, and they move through the water in slow, graceful arcs, their orange and white bodies creating patterns that shimmer and shift as they swim. By the time noon approaches, the household has settled into a kind of rhythm that feels as natural and predictable as breathing. Everyone knows their role, everyone understands the expectations that accompany their position, and within this framework, there is actually a kind of freedom. The structure is so complete that individual members of the household can trust that everything else is being cared for, and thus they can focus their attention fully on their own particular responsibilities and pursuits. This is perhaps the deepest secret of the samurai household during the Edo period. That perfect structure creates the conditions for perfect freedom. To truly understand life in a samurai household during the Edo period, one must understand not only the rhythms and routines, but also the physical spaces themselves, for in Japanese architecture and spatial planning, there is encoded an entire philosophy of how people should relate to one another and to the world around them. The Takeda estate is not a single unified structure, but rather a carefully composed collection of buildings and gardens, each one precisely positioned in relation to the others, each one serving a specific function, and all of them together creating a harmonious whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. At the very center of the estate is the Honmaru, the inner citadel, where the residence of the daimyo and his immediate family is located. This is a building of considerable size, yet it conveys a sense of quiet power rather than ostentatious display. The exterior walls are of dark wood, stained with age and weather into a color that seems to blend with the natural landscape. The roof, with its curved tiles and decorative ridge ornament, is the highest point in the estate, symbolically representing the elevated status of the family that lives within. The building is raised slightly above ground level on a foundation of stone, a practical measure that allows air to circulate beneath the floors preventing moisture accumulation and extending the life of the wooden structure, but which also conveys a certain aesthetic sense of the building floating above the earth. Inside the main residence, the spaces unfold according to a logic that is at once practical and deeply symbolic. The rooms are defined by sliding doors, the shoji and fusuma, screens of paper or painted wood that can be quickly rearranged to change the configuration of space as needed. This adaptability is one of the most important features of Japanese domestic architecture, for it means that a single space can be multiple spaces depending on the time of day, the season, or the particular needs of the moment. In the morning, a room that was used for sleeping might be opened up into a larger space for formal receiving of guests. The bedding rolled up and stored away, the transformation accomplished in a matter of minutes. The tatami mat, the woven floor covering that covers all the interior spaces of the household, is not merely a practical surface, but a fundamental organizing principle of Japanese domestic life. The size of a room is not measured in square feet or meters, as might be done in the West, but rather in the number of tatami mats it can contain. A standard room might be 4.5 mats, or 6 mats, or 8 mats, and this measurement system creates an inherent modularity to the space that is both aesthetically pleasing and functionally efficient. Moreover, the boundaries between mat and mat are like invisible lines of significance. When sitting on tatami, one sits on a mat. One's position on the mat carries subtle meanings about one's role and status in relation to others in the room. The place of honor, the tokonoma end of the room, is a slightly elevated area where the most important person present should position himself or herself. In the formal reception room where the daimyo meets with visitors of rank, the arrangement of space speaks volumes about hierarchy and respect. There is the raised portion, about 6 inches high, where the daimyo sits on a thin cushion called a zabuton, his back to the tokonoma with its hanging scroll, his position facing out toward the room and toward whoever enters to present themselves to him. Several mats lower than this, the space where important visitors are invited to sit, separated from the daimyo's position by perhaps 10 or 15 feet, which, despite the actual distance, creates a profound sense of appropriate separation and respect. Every aspect of this spatial arrangement communicates without words the nature of the relationships and hierarchies that govern the household. The library study of the daimyo is perhaps the most personal space in the entire estate, and it reveals much about his character and values. The walls are lined with shelves containing hundreds of scrolls and books, many of them acquired over decades of collecting. There are volumes on military strategy, books of poetry, philosophical texts, works of history, and even some examples of the popular fiction that, despite the samurai's supposed disdain for such frivolous entertainment, he secretly enjoys reading. In the alcove, a small scroll painting depicts the great Zen master Bodhidharma sitting in meditation, and beneath it sits a simple brush and inkstone, evidence that the daimyo regularly practices calligraphy, the writing of characters as an art form. The room is lit by small windows, positioned to take advantage of the natural light at different times of day, and in the late afternoon, when the sun is lower on the horizon, the entire room is filled with a warm golden light that makes one feel as though one is enclosed within amber. The women's quarters, though separate from the main residence, are not inferior in either size or quality. Rather, they are organized according to different principles that reflect the particular role of women in the samurai household. The lady Takeda has her own receiving room, only slightly less formally appointed than her husband's, where she meets with female visitors of rank and conducts the business of the household's management. She has her own sleeping quarters, separate from those of her husband, a custom that is nearly universal among the samurai elite, though the couple will occasionally meet in other spaces for intimate purposes. The women's quarters also contain spaces dedicated to pursuits like flower arrangement, tea ceremony, and the arts of beautification, though this last term hardly captures the austere, almost meditative quality of the spaces devoted to such practices. The tea house deserves special attention, for it is perhaps the most spiritually significant space within the estate, after the shrine to the ancestral kami that sits at the very edge of the property. The tea house is a small building, deliberately modest in appearance, built according to strict principles that govern every aspect of its construction. The entry is through a small doorway, so low that one must crouch or crawl to pass through it, a deliberate equalizing gesture that forces all who enter, regardless of rank, to humble themselves in the same way. Inside, the space is almost bare, a few mats on the floor, an alcove with a single scroll and perhaps a small flower arrangement, a sunken hearth in the floor where water is heated for tea and nothing else. Here, in this space stripped of everything unnecessary, the tea ceremony is performed, and in the preparation and consumption of tea, the participants find a kind of spiritual refreshment that transcends the purely physical. The gardens surrounding the main residence are not gardens in the Western sense, with beds of colorful flowers arranged for visual effect. Rather, they are carefully composed landscapes in miniature, designed to evoke the feeling of nature while remaining under complete artistic control. There are stones positioned with infinite care to suggest mountains or water. There is moss, allowed to grow in certain places and carefully removed from others, creating patterns that please the eye. There are trees, some of them shaped through decades of pruning into forms that suggest the weight of snow or the effects of wind. There is the koi pond, stocked with fish that are carefully selected for their coloring and form, each fish often given its own name by the household members who admire them. Walking through these gardens is a meditative experience, and many of the household members use the garden paths as a place to think to compose themselves, or simply to be present with the turning of the seasons. The servants' areas of the estate are more utilitarian in their design, but they are not squalid or unpleasant. The servants have their own communal sleeping areas, their own dining space, their own bathing facilities, all of which are clean and orderly, even if they lack the aesthetic refinement of the main residence. There is a large kitchen building, its interior dominated by a great cooking fire with a chimney rising up through the roof, and this space is actually quite pleasant, warmed by the constant heat of the cooking fire, fragrant with the smells of food being prepared. The cook's apprentices often find this the coziest place on the estate during the cold months, and it is not uncommon to see them lingering there even after their work is complete, drawn by the warmth and the sense of community that the space naturally creates. The training courtyard is a large open space, paved with fitted stone, with high walls on all sides to enclose it and provide a sense of isolation from the rest of the world. Here, the samurai practice their martial arts, and the very nature of the space enclosed, austere, dedicated purely to the development of fighting skill, creates an atmosphere quite different from the more aesthetic spaces of the main residence. Yet, even here, there is beauty, for the human body moving with perfect control and grace, whether in sword practice or in the practice of hand-to-hand combat, is beautiful to behold. And after the training sessions, when the warriors are bathing and changing their clothes, the courtyard is often used for other purposes. Young children might practice their lessons there on fine afternoons, or servants might gather to mend clothing, and the space transforms itself according to need. The stable buildings are positioned on the outer reaches of the estate for several reasons, both practical and symbolic. Horses require a great deal of space and generate smells and sounds that might be considered incompatible with the quiet refinement of the main residence. However, the stables are also kept immaculately clean, and the horses themselves, often magnificent creatures with glossy coats and alert, intelligent eyes, are treated with respect. A samurai's horse is an essential part of his identity, and the care and training of horses is considered an important part of one's education and development. The grooms who care for the horses are skilled professionals, and their work is viewed as neither servile nor beneath the dignity of a warrior who takes pride in being able to care for his own mount. The storage warehouses, positioned near the outer walls of the estate, contain the reserves of rice and other foodstuffs that represent the wealth and security of the household. These buildings are built with thick walls and strong wooden doors, and they are kept locked when they are not being accessed by authorized personnel. The storing of rice is a matter of great importance, for rice is not merely food but also currency, and a samurai household's financial status is often measured in terms of the amount of rice it can command. The warehouses are cool and dry, designed to preserve their contents for as long as possible, and their very solidity seems to represent the enduring stability of the clan. All of these spaces, taken together, create a world that is completely self-contained, a miniature universe in which every need is anticipated and provided for. One could imagine living one's entire life within the boundaries of the estate and never feeling as though anything important was being missed. Yet the estate is not a prison or a fortress, in the sense of being designed primarily for defense against enemies in the Edo period, when peace has been secured across the realm. The walls and enclosed nature of the estate serve more symbolic purposes than practical ones. Rather, the enclosed nature of the space speaks to a philosophical understanding that within clear boundaries, great freedom is possible, and that a well-organized space is one in which the human spirit can flourish. As the afternoon light moves toward evening and the household members continue their various activities, we come to a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be a samurai during the Edo period, and how the structure and discipline of daily life serve a purpose far deeper than mere orderliness. For the samurai code, known as Bushido, is not something that is followed because it is written down in a law book or enforced by external authority, but rather because it has been internalized through years of training and discipline until it becomes as natural and automatic as breathing itself. Katsu, the samurai we first encountered this morning, exemplifies this deep integration of the code into one's very being. After his morning sword training and a thorough bathing, he now sits in one of the small study rooms allocated to senior retainers, and he is reading a text that he has been studying for several months now. The book is called the Hagakure, a collection of teachings and sayings from an older samurai master, and it represents the distilled wisdom of generations of warriors who have pondered the nature of loyalty, honor, and the proper way to live. One passage in particular has captured his attention this afternoon, and he reads it slowly, allowing each word to sink deeply into his consciousness. The passage speaks of how the way of the samurai is found in death, and how to understand the way of the samurai. One must be willing at every moment to embrace death with perfect equanimity. This is not a morbid teaching, but rather a profound one, for by accepting death completely, one becomes free from the fear of death, and this freedom allows one to act with perfect clarity and purpose in all circumstances. For Katsu, who has now served the Takeda household for 12 years, such teachings are not abstract philosophy, but rather the fundamental framework within which he understands his own existence. He has never actually had to use his sword in combat. The Edo period is peaceful, and his sword skills are practiced but never applied in real warfare. Yet he carries within himself the complete readiness to do so, and to accept death if that should be required of him. This readiness is not something that causes him anxiety or depression, but rather a kind of calm certainty, for he has accepted the conditions of his existence and has chosen to embrace them fully rather than resist them. When he goes through his daily tasks, whether it is training in the morning, performing his duties for the daimyo, or simply sitting quietly as he does now. He does so with a level of presence and attention that is remarkable to observe. The afternoon training session is about to begin, and Katsu rises from his study to make his way back to the training courtyard. This afternoon, the focus will be on a different martial art, the practice of the spear, or naginata, a long pole weapon topped with a curved blade that requires both strength and a kind of flowing grace to wield effectively. The naginata was historically a favorite weapon of warrior monks and was also sometimes used by women warriors, but in the Takeda household, all the male samurai are trained in its use as part of a well-rounded martial education. As the warriors begin to gather in the courtyard, there is a sense of anticipation, for the master-at-arms has announced that today they will be practicing forms that they have not worked with for several months, and this will require them to refocus their attention and energy after the morning's sword work. The practice of martial forms, or kata, is central to the training of a samurai, and it represents one of the most important ways that the traditions of the past are passed down to new generations. In the kata, every movement is prescribed, every transition is predetermined, and the warrior learns to execute the form with perfect precision, over and over again, until the movements become so integrated into his body that he can perform them without conscious thought. This might seem like endless repetition, and in one sense it is, but what is happening beneath the surface is actually a profound form of learning. By practicing the prescribed form repeatedly, the body learns the optimal way to move, the mind learns to focus exclusively on the present moment, and the spirit begins to understand the principles that underlie the particular technique. In the kata, past, present, and future collapse into a single eternal now. As the warriors begin to move through the spear forms, their movements are slow and deliberate at first, each warrior focused entirely on the correctness of his own form, indifferent to what the others around him are doing. There is an old saying among samurai that the warrior should be like water, flowing around obstacles rather than trying to force his way through them, adapting to circumstances while maintaining his core integrity, never becoming so rigid that he breaks, never becoming so loose that he loses all form. And indeed, watching the warriors practice, one can see this principle expressed in their bodies, in the way they move and breathe and transition from one movement to the next. The forms are beautiful to watch, but more than that, they are profoundly calming to observe, for there is an absence of tension, an absence of striving that seems to impart itself to those watching. Meanwhile, in other parts of the estate, different forms of learning and development are taking place. In the women's quarters, the daimyo's daughter, a young woman named Tomoi, who is now 16 years old and will be married in just a few months, is practicing the arts of the tea ceremony under the instruction of an older woman named Katsume, who has been the tea master of the household for 30 years. The tea ceremony, or chanoyu, is not merely a social custom, but rather a highly developed art form that encompasses philosophy, aesthetics, and a subtle form of spiritual practice. Every movement in the ceremony is prescribed, just as in the martial kata, and yet within these constraints there is room for creativity and individual expression. The way one moves, the way one handles the ceramic vessels, the way one pours the hot water and prepares the powdered tea, all of these actions communicate something about the inner state of the person performing the ceremony. Tomoe is a serious student, and she has been learning the tea ceremony for more than 5 years now. Yet she approaches each practice session with the understanding that there is always something new to learn, always some refinement to be discovered. Today, Katsume is teaching her a particular aspect of the ceremony that involves the handling of the whisk, the tool used to mix the powdered tea with hot water into a frothy beverage. The whisk is made of bamboo, split into delicate strands, and the way one manipulates it is crucial to creating the proper consistency and texture of the tea. Katsume demonstrates the movement slowly, and Tomoe watches with absolute focus, and then she attempts to recreate what she has seen. Her first attempt is good, but not perfect, and Katsume, with a gentle gesture and a quiet word, suggests a slight adjustment in the angle of the wrist. Tomoe tries again, and this time the movement is correct, and there is a moment of quiet satisfaction that passes between teacher and student, a recognition that something important has been transmitted. In the library study, the daimyo is now being joined by a young scholar who visits the household once a week to instruct the daimyo's younger son, Haruto, who is 18 years old and is being groomed to take over leadership of the household in another decade or so, when his father reaches the age when such responsibilities are typically passed to the next generation. The scholar, a man named Araki who studied in Kyoto and has a deep knowledge of classical Chinese philosophy and literature, is today discussing with both the daimyo and his son a particularly challenging passage from the works of Confucius. The passage deals with the concept of filial piety, the duty of a son to his father, and how one balances the demands of personal integrity with the requirements of duty and obedience. This is not merely an academic question, but a profoundly practical one. For the future, daimyo must understand how to navigate the sometimes conflicting demands of personal conscience and the duties imposed upon him by his rank and position. The discussion is conducted in a formal but not rigid manner, with the scholar presenting the classical interpretation, the daimyo offering his own understanding based on decades of practical experience, and the young Haruto listening carefully and occasionally asking thoughtful questions. There is a genuine respect between all three participants, a recognition that wisdom comes in different forms from the ancient texts, from the lived experience of the current daimyo, and from the fresh perspective of a young man preparing to assume his role in the world. By the time the discussion concludes, a couple of hours have passed, and the light coming through the windows has shifted from the warm golden light of mid-afternoon to the deeper, more golden light of late afternoon, when the sun is beginning to approach the horizon. Throughout the household, as the afternoon transitions toward evening, there is a shifting of energies and purposes. The training in the courtyard concludes, and the warriors make their way to bathe again, washing away the sweat and dust of their practice. Servants move through the corridors, ensuring that everything is in order for the evening meal. The kitchen workers begin to prepare the food for dinner, which will be more substantial than breakfast, but still following the principles of simplicity and nutritional wisdom. In the gardens, the old gardener, Jiro, is beginning to gather his tools, preparing to conclude his day's work. And as the evening approaches, the sound of cicadas becomes more prominent, a rhythmic, almost mechanical chirping that fills the air with sound that is both beautiful and slightly haunting. A crucial aspect of samurai training that deserves particular attention is the concept of ma, or negative space, which is deeply embedded in Japanese aesthetics and philosophy. The samurai understand that what is not done is often as important as what is done, that the spaces between actions are as significant as the actions themselves, and that sometimes the most powerful response to a challenge is no response at all, but rather a perfect receptivity and stillness. This principle is practiced in all aspects of the samurai's training, from martial arts to the arts of refinement like calligraphy and tea ceremony. In sword practice, for example, the space between breaths is considered as important as the breath itself, and a warrior who maintains perfect awareness of this space between is considered to have achieved a high level of mastery. The concept of mono-aware, often translated as the pathos of things, is another deeply important element of the samurai worldview, and it permeates much of what they do. This is an awareness of the transient, impermanent nature of all things, and rather than leading to despair or resignation, it actually leads to a deeper appreciation for the beauty and value of each moment as it passes. A samurai might spend an afternoon contemplating a single flower, not in idle leisure but in serious meditation, understanding that this flower will bloom only for a brief period, and that its beauty is enhanced rather than diminished by the knowledge that it will soon fade. This deep appreciation for transience also means that a samurai approaches each day as if it might be his last, not in a frantic rush to accomplish as much as possible, but rather with a profound gratitude and attention to the privilege of being alive and conscious. In the household of Takeda Noboru, these philosophical principles are not discussed in the abstract, but are lived out daily in the conduct of each person. A young servant who approaches his work with dedication and care, understanding it as practice in the development of his own character and spirit, is embodying these principles just as much as a senior samurai engaged in sword practice or the study of classical texts. The cook preparing the evening meal with her full attention, making sure that each ingredient is treated with respect and that the dish as a whole represents not merely nutrition but a kind of visual poetry, is practicing a form of meditation and spiritual development. The gardener, tending to his plants with patience and attention, is engaged in a conversation with nature that spans years and decades, a patient dialogue in which he learns to work with the inherent nature of each plant rather than imposing his will upon it. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple, the household gathers itself for the transition from day to evening, and we come to the final chapter of our exploration of samurai life during this remarkable period of peace. The evening is not considered a time of leisure or relaxation, as it might be in many other cultures, but rather as a continuation of the day's purposeful activity with a slightly different character and focus. The daimyo himself, having concluded his afternoon studies and discussions, now moves to a different part of the residence to prepare for the evening meal. His bath for the second time that day is shorter and less formal than the morning ritual, more of a simple washing and cooling off after the mental exertions of the day. He changes into garments that are less formal than his daytime clothes, but still of high quality and appropriate to his rank, a comfortable kosode of deep indigo silk, and a light haori that has been in his family for generations, its fabric worn soft from decades of use. This wearing of old, comfortable garments in one's private spaces is considered perfectly proper among the samurai elite, and there is no sense that one must maintain an appearance of formality when among family or close retainers. The evening meal takes place in a space somewhat less formal than the breakfast room, a chamber that overlooks the garden and the koi pond, where the first stars are beginning to become visible in the deepening sky. The meal itself is an occasion of some grace and beauty, with each dish carefully prepared and presented, and yet it is also understood as a practical matter of sustenance and family connection. The daimyo's wife joins him, as do their youngest son and their daughter, while the older son is dining with the other samurai retainers in a separate room, his role now aligned more with the warriors than with the immediate family unit. The daimyo's elderly mother, who lives in a quieter wing of the residence, takes her meal alone in her own quarters, a privilege of age and the deference shown to elders in samurai society. The conversation around the dinner table is relaxed but never frivolous. They might discuss a matter of household administration that requires the daimyo's judgment, or speak of the changing seasons and how they will approach the coming autumn, or make observations about the behavior of the koi in the pond or the performance of the garden plants. The daimyo's daughter, Tomoe, speaks of her studies in the tea ceremony and expresses some nervousness about her upcoming marriage, and her mother offers words of reassurance while her father, with the kind of gentle firmness that characterizes his parenting style, reminds her that she has been well trained and has nothing to fear. her new household will welcome her as a representative of the Takeda clan, and she will carry that responsibility with honor, just as her mother has done for nearly 2 decades. After the meal, as evening settles fully over the estate and lanterns are lit throughout the residence, casting pools of warm light against the gathering darkness, the household members disperse into their various evening pursuits. Some of the older warriors gather in a common room where they drink sake, a mild rice wine, and discuss matters of strategy or history, or simply enjoy each other's company in comfortable silence. The daimyo retires to his library study one more time, where he will spend the remainder of the evening reading or composing, engaging in what might be called the spiritual work of the day, when the mind is less actively engaged, but perhaps more deeply attentive to subtle meanings and connections. In the women's quarters, the Lady Takeda sits with several of her attendants in a room where an oil lamp casts a warm amber light, and they are engaged in needlework. This is not mere busy work, but rather a highly developed art form, with intricate patterns being stitched into silk and cotton fabrics that will become part of the family's collection of fine textiles. There is no pressure to work quickly, and indeed, a piece might take weeks or months to complete, with much of the value lying in the meditative quality of the work itself. As they work, they speak in quiet voices, sharing stories and observations, and there is a sense of profound companionship and mutual support that characterizes these evening gatherings. The younger attendants learn not only the technical skills of needlework, but also the art of living well, of maintaining one's dignity and grace under all circumstances, of performing one's duties with quiet excellence. Young Tomoe has now completed her tea ceremony practice for the day and joins her mother in the evening gathering, bringing her own needlework with her. She sits slightly to the side of her mother, not quite claiming the same level of authority, but near enough to emphasize the continuity between generations, the passing down of responsibilities and wisdom from mother to daughter. Her older attendants watch her carefully, offering quiet suggestions and corrections, and she receives them all with the kind of receptivity that suggests that she understands. She is being prepared for a role of considerable importance and responsibility. When her marriage takes place in a few months' time, she will move to her husband's household and will take up a position as the wife of a samurai retainer, responsible for the management of her own household's internal affairs, and everything she is learning now is preparation for that transition. In the servants' quarters, the evening activities are both similar to and distinct from those in the main residence. The servants have their own evening meal, which is simpler than that of the family but nourishing and prepared with the same care that goes into the family's food. After eating, some of the servants retire to rest, knowing that they must rise early the next morning, while others gather in the communal areas for leisure time, and these are precious hours in which their labor is complete and they can relax into conversations and games that help to build community among people who work in close quarters. There is often singing, and the sound of their voices drifts across the compound, carrying with it a kind of poignancy, for the servants are not part of the samurai class and will never achieve the elevated status that membership in that class confers. Yet they are nevertheless part of the Takeda household and take pride in their association with it. The old gardener, Jiro, having completed his day's work, moves slowly through the gardens one final time before retiring for the evening. He is in his 70s now, and his joints ache with the cold that seems to live permanently in the Japanese earth. But his love for these gardens has not diminished over the decades. As he walks, he notices a small branch that has grown in a direction he does not desire, and he makes a mental note to carefully prune it the next day. He observes that the moss in one corner of the garden is growing particularly well this year, and he considers whether it should be encouraged or limited. These constant small observations and adjustments, made over a lifetime, have created a landscape that is both entirely artificial, for it represents the human will to order and beautify, and yet somehow more natural than nature itself, a kind of perfect marriage between the human spirit and the natural world. The night continues to deepen, and the sounds of the daytime activities fade away, to be replaced by the sounds of night, the rustling of small creatures in the vegetation, the occasional call of a bird, the sound of wind moving through the trees. The lanterns throughout the estate begin to be extinguished one by one as the household members prepare for sleep, following rhythms that have been maintained for generations. By the time full darkness has settled over the compound, only a few lights remain burning. In rooms where night work continues, the daimyo still in his library study, perhaps, or a night attendant making rounds to ensure that all is well. In the main sleeping quarters, servants are laying out fresh futons for the night, placing them on the tatami mats with precision, ensuring that all is ready for the family to settle into sleep. The bedding is cool and clean, having been aired in the afternoon sun, and there is something deeply comforting about the feeling of slipping into bed in one's own home, knowing that the household is secure and orderly around you. The daimyo, having finally concluded his evening studies, makes his way to his sleeping quarters, moving through the darkened corridors with the casual certainty of someone who knows these spaces so thoroughly that he could navigate them with his eyes closed. His wife is already in the sleeping chamber, and they exchange only a few quiet words before settling into their respective futons, prepared to enter the sleep that will restore them for another day of the same beautiful, ordered routine. But before we allow ourselves to drift into sleep with them, let us pause for a moment to reflect on what we have witnessed in this day within the Takeda household, and what it reveals about the nature of samurai life during the Edo period, that remarkable era when peace allowed for a flowering of culture and philosophy. We have seen that life is governed not by external rules or threats of punishment, but by an internalized sense of duty and propriety that has been cultivated through years of training and discipline. We have observed that every action, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, is performed with full attention and care, because the samurai understand that perfection in small things is the foundation for excellence in large matters. We have witnessed that within the framework of clearly defined hierarchies and structures, there is actually considerable freedom and opportunity for the development of individual character and excellence. The Edo period, despite what many might assume about a warrior class, was not a time of constant conflict or the exercise of brutal military power. Rather, it was a time when the samurai, freed from the necessity of constant warfare, had the opportunity to develop themselves more fully as human beings, to pursue the arts and philosophy, to become cultivated men and women who understood that true strength comes not from domination, but from discipline, not from accumulation of power, but from the perfect performance of duty. The samurai code, Bushido, which emphasizes loyalty, honor, self-discipline, and a kind of acceptance of death that paradoxically makes life more precious and meaningful, developed to its fullest expression during this era of peace. The household itself, as we have seen, is far more than a mere dwelling place. It is a carefully constructed environment in which every element, the arrangement of rooms, the quality of materials, the organization of the garden, the relationship between people contributes to the creation of an integrated whole that supports the development and flourishing of all who live within it. The hierarchy that structures relationships within the household is not oppressive but rather clarifying, establishing clear lines of responsibility and creating spaces for people to develop and excel within their particular role. The servant who performs his duties with care is not diminished by his lower status, but rather ennobled by his commitment to excellence, just as the daimyo's authority is not enhanced by harsh command, but rather by his wisdom and the respect he inspires through his just governance. The routines and rituals that structure the day are not designed to suppress individuality or creativity, but rather to create a framework within which both can flourish. By removing the necessity of making endless small decisions about trivial matters, the routines free the mind for deeper work, the pursuit of martial excellence, the development of aesthetic sensibility, the contemplation of philosophical questions, the simple experience of being present and fully alive in each moment. The discipline of the daily routines becomes, paradoxically, a kind of freedom, a liberation from the tyranny of impulse and distraction. The relationship between the samurai household and the broader world outside its walls is also important to understand. While the household is enclosed and largely self-sufficient, it is not isolated from the larger society. The daimyo has responsibilities to the shogunate, the central government, and must periodically travel to Edo to attend the court and demonstrate his loyalty and his willingness to submit to the larger political order. He must also maintain relationships with neighboring daimyo, and there is a constant network of diplomacy and courtesy that connects the various samurai households throughout Japan. The household is part of a larger structure, a pyramid of loyalties and obligations that extends upward to the shogun and downward to the thousands of retainers and servants who depend on the daimyo's leadership for their livelihood and security. The education of children within the household follows principles that will create adults capable of fulfilling their roles within this complex social structure. Sons are trained from an early age in the martial arts and in the philosophical and ethical principles that should guide their conduct. Daughters are trained in the arts of household management, aesthetic pursuits, and the subtle skills of social diplomacy that will be required when they marry into other households. Even the children of servants receive a form of education, learning the skills necessary to perform their assigned roles and understanding their place within the household hierarchy. Education is not primarily about the accumulation of facts or credentials, as it might be in a modern Western context, but rather about the formation of character and the development of virtue or toku, the ability to fulfill one's assigned role with excellence. The relationship between the samurai and death is also worth contemplating, for it is one of the most distinctive features of samurai culture during this period. The willingness to accept death, not as a morbid obsession, but as a simple fact of existence that frees one to live fully and virtuously, shapes every aspect of samurai life and conduct. This acceptance is not passive resignation, but rather an active choice to live according to principles of honor and duty, regardless of the personal consequences. In this sense, the samurai of the Edo period, even though they live in a time of peace and may never actually face death in combat, are always prepared for it, and this preparation creates a kind of psychological and spiritual freedom that allows them to act with clarity and purpose in all situations. The aesthetics of the samurai household during the Edo period reflect a profound philosophical understanding about the nature of beauty and its relationship to truth and virtue. The emphasis on simplicity, on the use of natural materials, on the careful composition of empty space, these are not merely artistic preferences, but rather expressions of a deeper worldview that sees the world as fundamentally empty, infinite, full of potential, and that views the human role as one of creating order and meaning within that emptiness through discipline, attention, and right conduct. The tea house with its bare floor and single flower arrangement, the garden with its carefully composed rocks and carefully pruned trees, the calligraphy with its bold brush strokes, and the white space surrounding them, all of these embody a philosophical position about the nature of reality and the path to truth. As we prepare to conclude our journey through a day in the life of the Takeda household, let us imagine the deeper rhythms that structure life across not just a single day, but across seasons and years and generations. The autumn will come with its particular beauties and demands, and the household will adjust its routines accordingly, shifting the plants in the garden, preparing for the cold months ahead. The winter will arrive with snow that covers the landscape in white silence, and the household will gather more closely together, finding warmth and community in the enclosed spaces of the residence. The spring will come again with the blooming of the cherry blossoms, a renewal of life and hope, and the household will celebrate this eternal cycle of death and rebirth that governs all living things. And then summer will arrive once more with its heat and its particular demands, and the cycle will continue, repeating itself with variations, but maintaining its essential character. The continuity is one of the most remarkable features of the samurai household during this period. A household that has been established for 100 years or more will continue much as it has for decades, each generation maintaining the traditions established by their ancestors, while also making small, careful innovations that allow the household to adapt and respond to changing circumstances. The daimyo will die and be succeeded by his son, who will in turn be succeeded by his son, and each transition will involve careful ceremonies and the transfer of both power and responsibility. The servants will age and retire, or will pass away, and be replaced by younger servants who will in turn become the elders of the household and teach the younger generation the proper ways of conducting themselves. In this way, traditions are maintained across the generations, knowledge is preserved, and the accumulated wisdom of centuries of experience is kept alive and relevant. In the darkness of the Takeda estate, as the household members sleep and dream, we might imagine their dreams as extensions of their daytime activities, the samurai dreaming of perfecting some technique, the cook dreaming of some new combination of flavors, the gardener dreaming of the perfect arrangement of stones, each person's unconscious mind continuing the work of creating order and beauty that occupies their waking hours. And when morning comes again, as it always does, they will wake to the sound of the temple bell or the call of birds, and they will rise and perform their ablutions and don their clothing and move through the routines that have been established for generations, each person contributing their part to the larger whole, each action participating in the endless dance of duty and honor that is the essence of samurai life. The samurai household during the Edo period represents a remarkable achievement of human civilization, a society that has managed to combine rigid structure with genuine freedom, that values discipline without becoming oppressive, that emphasizes the development of individual excellence within the context of clear hierarchies and defined roles. It is not a society without flaws or contradictions, the subservience of women, while not as extreme as in some societies, is still a limiting factor, and the rigid class structure means that social mobility is very limited, and there are certainly aspects of the society that might trouble a modern observer. Yet it is also a society that has found ways to make life meaningful and beautiful, that has created spaces for art and philosophy to flourish, that has developed a culture of extreme refinement and aesthetic sensitivity. In many ways, it represents an ideal that remains relevant to modern people struggling to find meaning and structure in their own lives. As our story of the Takeda household draws to a close, and we prepare to allow ourselves to drift fully into sleep, reflecting on the world we have witnessed, we might take with us some of the wisdom that the samurai have discovered through their way of life. We might reflect on the power of structure and discipline to create freedom rather than to constrain it. We might consider the value of approaching each task, no matter how small, with full attention and care. We might contemplate the idea that true strength comes not from the domination of others, but from the mastery of oneself, from the cultivation of virtue and the acceptance of our place within a larger order. We might understand that beauty is not separate from function, that the most useful object can also be the most beautiful, that art and life are not divided but are rather expressions of the same underlying principles. And we might come to appreciate the profound peace that comes from accepting the circumstances of our existence and choosing to flourish within them, rather than constantly fighting against them or desiring to be elsewhere than where we are. The Takeda household, with all of its carefully ordered beauty and discipline, exists now only in the realm of imagination, a fictional creation that draws on historical reality but represents an idealized vision of samurai life. Yet the principles it embodies, the values it represents, and the vision of human life that it expresses remain alive and relevant, speaking to something deep in the human spirit that yearns for meaning, order, beauty, and a sense of being part of something larger than oneself. In our modern world, so often characterized by chaos, fragmentation, and the constant assault of trivial information and competing demands on our attention, the serene order of the samurai household calls to us with a kind of gentle persistence, reminding us that another way of being is possible, that structure and discipline need not be oppressive, that simplicity and restraint can create the conditions for genuine human flourishing. As the night deepens and sleep approaches, we might imagine ourselves walking through the gardens of the Takeda estate one final time, hearing the soft call of night birds, feeling the cool night air, and understanding, in a way that goes beyond words and concepts, the deep peace that comes from living in harmony with established order, with accepted duty, and with the knowledge that we are part of a vast continuum of tradition and human endeavor that stretches backward into the past and forward into the future. The morning will come again, just as it has come every morning of the Takeda household's long existence, and the bell will sound, and the servants will rise and begin their work, and the samurai will perform their training, and the daimyo will move through his day with the same measured grace and conscious attention that he brings to every day of his life. Nothing spectacular will happen, perhaps. No great battles will be fought, no dramatic revelations will occur, no crisis will test the mettle of the household members in any obvious way. Yet, in the very ordinariness of the day, in the faithful performance of duties that seem humble or routine, in the maintenance of the structures and traditions that have been carefully built over generations, there is a kind of heroism that is every bit as noble as anything that happens on a battlefield. The heroism of showing up day after day and doing one's work with care and attention and integrity, the heroism of maintaining standards of beauty and excellence, even when no one is watching and there is no external reward for doing so, the heroism of accepting one's place in the world and finding that acceptance to be a source of freedom rather than oppression. In our modern world, so disconnected from the rhythms of nature and tradition, we might find ourselves longing for the kind of order and stability that the Takeda household represents. We are, many of us, adrift in a sea of choices and possibilities, lacking the clear structures and defined roles that gave life meaning to the samurai of the Edo period. We are bombarded constantly with information and stimuli, with demands on our attention that fragment our consciousness and make it difficult to maintain focus or peace of mind. We live in a world of constant change, where the skills and knowledge we acquire today may be obsolete tomorrow, where the structures we depend on are constantly being dismantled and rebuilt, where nothing seems stable or permanent. And in the face of all this, the vision of the samurai household offers something profound, not a blueprint that we can simply copy and apply to our modern lives, but rather a testament to the power of human beings to create order and meaning through discipline, attention, and the commitment to excellence in whatever we do. Let us now allow ourselves to drift more deeply towards sleep, carrying with us the images and impressions of this day in the Takeda household. We have walked through the early morning mists when the household was just beginning to stir. We have watched the careful performances of daily rituals and routines. We have observed the training and education that shapes the character of the next generation. We have experienced the quiet comfort of community and shared purpose, and we have come to understand something of the spiritual depth that underlies what might appear to be merely the superficial activities of daily life. All of these experiences, woven together, create a tapestry of human experience that is both alien to us in its specificity and utterly familiar in its essential concerns, the need to belong, to contribute, to develop our capacities, to create beauty, to maintain integrity, and to accept the conditions of our existence with grace and equanimity. The samurai household is structured around what might be called a hierarchical harmony, a system in which every person knows their place and their responsibilities, but in which there is no sense of oppression or resentment about this arrangement, because the hierarchy serves a larger purpose that everyone understands and accepts. The servant understands that his role in the household, though lower in status than that of the samurai, is nonetheless essential and honorable. The samurai warrior understands that his training and martial prowess serve the larger security and stability of the household and the clan. The daimyo understands that his position of authority carries with it profound responsibilities, and that his ultimate purpose is to serve the interests of all those who depend on him for their livelihood and protection. In this understanding, there is a kind of beauty and justice, for everyone's efforts are aimed at the good of the whole, and in serving the whole, each individual is also serving their own truest interests. The concept of duty, or giri, is central to understanding the samurai household, and it is important to emphasize that duty is not understood as a kind of servitude or burdensome obligation, but rather as the path to freedom and fulfillment. By accepting one's duty to one's family, to one's lord, to one's role in society, to the principles of honor and virtue that give life meaning, a person paradoxically becomes free. Free from the constant anxiety of making individual decisions, free from the endless pursuit of personal advantage, free from the fragmentation that comes from trying to be many different things to many different people, free to focus fully on the perfection of one's role and the development of one's character within that role. This is a profound insight that modern psychology is only beginning to recover, the understanding that imposed structure can actually facilitate authentic self-expression and genuine freedom. Let us imagine now the quiet of the household as the night deepens further, as even the servants have retired to sleep, and the only sounds are the natural sounds of the night, the rustling of wind through the gardens, the occasional cry of a night creature, the subtle creaking of the wooden buildings as they settle into the cool night air. In the library study, all the scrolls and books rest on their shelves, waiting for the dawn when someone will open them again and engage in the eternal conversation between past wisdom and present understanding that is the nature of serious study. In the gardens, the carefully tended plants sleep as well, their growth suspended but not ended, preparing for the morning when the sun will rise again and the process of transformation will continue. In the tea house by the koi pond, the vessels and implements used for the ceremony rest on their proper shelves, empty now but containing within them the memory of countless ceremonies performed, each one a small act of communion and shared understanding between people who gathered to participate in that ritual. The daimyo, now deep in sleep, dreams perhaps of past battles, even though he has never actually fought in such battles himself, for the memories of the samurai class include the battles fought by previous generations, and these memories are passed down and internalized until they feel like one's own experience. Or perhaps he dreams simply of the familiar spaces of his household, moving through them as he does every day, and finding in the dream a kind of deeper knowledge of their meaning and significance. His wife sleeps soundly, her mind and body at rest after a day of conscious attention and responsible action, and in her sleep there is a kind of reintegration of the energies that have been expended during the day's work. The samurai retainers sleep in their quarters, their dreams perhaps still engaged with the movements and techniques they practiced during the day, their minds working through the night to integrate and solidify the learning that has been pursued. The servants sleep crowded together in their communal quarters, their sleep deep and uncomplicated, the sleep of those whose consciences are clear and whose work is complete. And the old gardener, Jiro, sleeps perhaps more lightly than the others, for at his age sleep often comes in shorter intervals. But when sleep comes to him, it is restful, for he has spent his day in meaningful work, surrounded by the beauty of the gardens that he has tended for so many decades. In his dreams, he might imagine new arrangements of stones, new combinations of plants, new ways of creating beauty that he will experiment with in the days and months to come. For the gardener never truly stops being a gardener, even in sleep and dreams. His mind continues the work of composition and creation that is his life's purpose. Let us consider now the question of what makes a life meaningful and fulfilling, for this is perhaps the deepest question that the Takeda household raises for us. In the modern Western world, we tend to believe that a meaningful life is one in which we pursue our individual goals and ambitions, in which we seek self-actualization and the expression of our unique individual nature. We are taught to follow our passion, to seek careers that are personally fulfilling, to view our work as an expression of our authentic self, and to regard any constraints on this self-expression as oppressive and limiting. The samurai household, by contrast, seems to suggest that a meaningful life can be found through the acceptance of one's assigned role, through the pursuit of excellence within that role, and through the subordination of personal desires to the larger needs and purposes of the community and tradition to which one belongs. This is not to say that the samurai path is superior to the modern Western path, but rather to suggest that both paths contain important truths, and that perhaps a more complete understanding of human flourishing would integrate elements of both approaches. The samurai of the Edo period had the advantage of living within a stable tradition, with clear expectations and well-established paths for development and growth. A young samurai could look to the examples of his father, grandfather, and the great samurai of the past, and could understand what was expected of him and what he needed to do to fulfill those expectations. There was perhaps less anxiety about choosing the wrong path, because the path was already laid out before him, and his task was simply to walk it as well as he possibly could. In our modern world, we have greater freedom to choose our own paths, but we also have the burden of this choice, and many of us are paralyzed by the infinite possibilities available to us, unable to commit fully to any particular course because we fear we might be missing out on other possibilities. The samurai solution to this problem, to choose a path and then to commit to it completely, developing yourself as fully as possible within that choice, might offer some wisdom for our modern dilemma. The physical environment of the samurai household, the carefully arranged rooms and gardens, the use of natural materials, the emphasis on empty space, and the beauty of simplicity, all of these things serve a purpose beyond mere aesthetics. They create an environment that is conducive to peace of mind, to the development of inner calm and clarity, to the ability to focus fully on one's work without distraction or agitation. In our modern world, we are surrounded by environments designed to overstimulate us, to capture our attention, to encourage consumption and acquisition, to create a sense of urgency and anxiety. The visual chaos of our modern world, the constant noise and bombardment of advertisements and information, the accumulation of possessions that fill our spaces and minds, all of these things make it difficult for us to achieve the kind of inner peace and clarity that the samurai valued so highly. Perhaps one of the most valuable lessons we can take from the samurai household is the importance of creating a physical environment that supports and nurtures our inner life, an environment of simplicity and order that allows our minds to rest and our spirits to flourish. The training methods used in the samurai household, with their emphasis on repetition, precision, and the gradual refinement of technique over a period of years or even decades, offer another important insight for our modern world. In an age when we are often promised instant results and quick fixes, when we are encouraged to move rapidly from one skill or interest to another in search of novelty and stimulation, the samurai commitment to long-term, patient development of a single skill seems almost revolutionary. Yet there is profound wisdom in this approach, for true mastery of any skill or art form requires not weeks or months, but years of patient, disciplined practice, and the benefits that come from this mastery, the confidence, the competence, the deep understanding that comes from intimate familiarity with one's chosen field, are far more valuable and enduring than the superficial familiarity that comes from rapid acquisition of diverse skills. A person who becomes truly excellent at one thing through years of dedicated practice has achieved something far more valuable than a person who has superficial knowledge of many things. As we continue to drift towards sleep, let us imagine the peace that would come from living a life structured like that of the samurai household, with clear purposes and accepted duties, with regular rhythms and established routines, with opportunities to pursue excellence and beauty within one's assigned role. We might imagine rising in the morning without the anxiety of wondering what we should do with our day, because our duties are clear and well established. We might imagine moving through our work with full attention and care, knowing that our efforts, though they might seem small or insignificant in the moment, are contributing to a larger whole and are part of a tradition that stretches back through time and forward into the future. We might imagine the comfort of living in community, surrounded by others with whom we share common purposes and values, all of us working together toward common goals, each person contributing their particular talents and abilities to the larger project of maintaining and improving our shared home and way of life. We might imagine the deep satisfaction that comes from developing our abilities through years of patient practice, from becoming genuinely excellent at something we value, from knowing that we have fulfilled our duty and lived up to the expectations placed upon us by our family, our community, and our tradition. The samurai household during the Edo period represents one possible way of organizing human life, one particular cultural expression of universal human needs and longings. It is not perfect, no human institution is, and it is shaped by the particular historical, geographical, and philosophical circumstances of Japan in the 18th and 19th centuries. Yet in its core principles, the importance of discipline and training, the value of community and shared purpose, the pursuit of excellence and beauty, the acceptance of duty and hierarchy, the integration of work and spiritual development, it speaks to something universal in the human spirit. We all, regardless of our culture or historical period, long for a life that is meaningful and well-ordered, for the opportunity to develop our abilities and contribute to something larger than ourselves, for a sense of belonging and community, for the experience of beauty and the knowledge that our efforts matter and are valued by others. The samurai household shows us one way that these longings can be fulfilled, one model of how human life can be organized to support genuine flourishing and the development of human excellence. As we approach the final moments before we allow ourselves to slip fully into sleep, let us rest in the contemplation of the Takeda estate in the deepest hours of night, when the household has settled into complete silence and rest. The buildings stand dark against the night sky, their wooden surfaces still holding the memory of the sunlight that warmed them during the day. The gardens sleep, the plants and trees waiting patiently for the return of sunlight and warmth. The koi in the pond rest on the bottom, their metabolic processes slowed by the cool night water, their bright colors hidden in darkness. All is still, all is quiet, all is at peace. And in this peace and quietude, we find the perfect complement to the activity and purposefulness of the day, the necessary rest that allows for renewal and regeneration, the silence that allows for integration and understanding of all that has been experienced and learned. The night watches pass slowly, and the household members sleep on, held safely within the walls and structures of their community, each person resting in the knowledge that tomorrow will bring the familiar rhythms and routines that give shape and meaning to their lives. The servants sleep knowing that they will wake to their assigned duties, and that these duties, though demanding, are part of the larger fabric of the household that gives their lives meaning and purpose. The samurai sleep knowing that they will wake to training and study that will continue to refine and develop the skills and character that define their identity and role. The lady of the household sleeps knowing that tomorrow will bring the continuation of her work in managing the household and preparing her daughter for the transition to her new life as a married woman. The daimyo sleeps in the knowledge that he is fulfilling his duty to maintain and lead his household with wisdom and integrity, and that the peaceful order that reigns within his walls is the result of his careful attention to the principles of hierarchy, ritual, and right conduct. And in the very heart of the estate, in the space where the past and present meet, where the ancestors are remembered and honored, where the traditions are preserved and passed down to future generations, there is a kind of eternal presence, a spiritual continuity that transcends the individual lives of the people who comprise the household at any particular moment. The Takeda clan existed before the current generation, and it will exist after them, and each person who is born into the household is participating in a story that is vastly larger than any individual life, a story that has depth and richness precisely because it has been developed over generations and has incorporated the wisdom and experience of countless people who have lived and died before. This sense of participating in something larger than oneself, of being part of a historical and spiritual continuum, gives the individual life a kind of weight and significance that is perhaps difficult for modern people to fully appreciate. Living as we do in societies that are relatively young and that emphasize individual achievement over communal identity. As sleep begins to overtake us, as our eyelids grow heavy and our thoughts begin to slow and drift, let us allow ourselves to imagine that we are resting in one of the quiet rooms of the Takeda household, lying on a futon that has been perfectly arranged for our comfort, hearing the soft sounds of the night, the wind in the trees, the distant call of a night bird, the subtle creaking of the wooden building, and feeling the profound peace that comes from being held safely within the ordered world of the household. We are, for this moment, part of the Takeda family, part of the samurai tradition, part of the long chain of human beings who have sought to create beauty, maintain order, develop excellence, and live lives of meaning and purpose within the frameworks and structures provided by their culture and community. We are home, we are safe, we are at peace, and tomorrow will bring the familiar rhythms and routines that give shape and meaning to existence. Let us now release our consciousness from the effort of sustained attention and allow it to drift as consciousness naturally does in the approach to sleep, becoming less focused and more open, less engaged with the particular details of experience, and more in touch with the general sensation of rest and peace that underlies all existence. The images of the Takeda household, the gardens, the main residence, the training courtyard, the tea house, the library study, the faces of the family members and servants begin to blur and fade, not disappearing entirely, but receding into that background of dream and memory where the waking mind's carefully organized thoughts give way to the more mysterious and associative workings of the sleeping mind. We are crossing the threshold between waking and sleeping, a threshold that has been crossed by countless human beings throughout history, including the samurai of the Edo period whose lives we have been exploring. And as we cross this threshold, we carry with us the impressions and insights we have gained from our time in the Takeda household, and these will work on us during the night, integrating themselves into our being, shaping our thoughts and feelings in ways that may only become apparent to us over time. The samurai household has taught us that life need not be complicated to be meaningful, that structure and discipline need not be oppressive but can rather be liberating, that beauty and excellence can be achieved through patience and careful attention to small details, that community and shared purpose provide a foundation for individual flourishing, that duty and responsibility, when fully accepted and embraced, become a source of freedom and fulfillment rather than constraint and suffering. These are the lessons that we carry with us as we drift finally into sleep. And these are the gifts that the Takeda household offers to those who pause long enough to contemplate its careful, ordered beauty. In the final moments before sleep completely overtakes us, we might be aware of a profound gratitude for the opportunity to have explored this world, even though it exists only in imagination and historical reconstruction, gratitude for the insights and understandings that have emerged from this exploration, and gratitude for the simple fact of being alive and conscious, able to experience and appreciate the beauty and meaning that human beings have created across the centuries, across the vast distances of time and culture. This gratitude itself becomes a kind of meditation, a final settling of the mind into peace and acceptance. And on this note of gratitude and peace, we finally release our hold on wakefulness and allow ourselves to sink into the restorative darkness of sleep. The Takeda estate sleeps on, night after night, and the household members rise and move through their days, day after day, year after year, generation after generation, maintaining the traditions, performing their duties, pursuing excellence, creating beauty, living lives of meaning and purpose within the framework of order and hierarchy that gives shape to their existence. And in some way that transcends the particular historical period in which it existed, the Takeda household continues to exist in the imagination and memory of those who have contemplated it, offering its wisdom and example to all who are willing to listen, teaching eternal lessons about what it means to live well, to structure one's life according to principles of beauty and excellence, and to find peace and fulfillment through the acceptance of duty and the commitment to sustained development of one's character and abilities. This is the final lesson of the samurai household, that life itself, when approached with full attention and commitment, is a kind of art form, and that the greatest work of art that any person can create is the careful, thoughtful, beautiful way that they live their days one after another in service to something larger than themselves. Sleep now and dream of gardens and tea houses, of mountains and mist, of the quiet strength of people living according to principles of honor and integrity, of the deep peace that comes from accepting one's place in the world and finding that acceptance to be a source of infinite freedom and profound satisfaction. Sleep well, and when you wake, carry with you the memory of the Takeda household, and let that memory inspire you to bring greater order, beauty, attention, and purpose to your own life, whatever the particular circumstances of that life might be.